Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. This is your host Amina Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of Next Gen, where we cover a multitude of topics, speaking to young, passionate individuals who are making strides in their community. Today, we are offering a bit of a different perspective with our discussion with a teacher, a new teacher from Houston, Texas, and she works with high schoolers. Many of our audience come from that age group, and hopefully, she can tell us about what it is like to be a first-year teacher during the pandemic, as well as some of the difficulties she faces in her career and what she hopes the community can do to help her and to empower other teachers. We're so honored to have with us Zainab Jabak, also known as Miss Jabak to some of her high school English teachers in Houston, Texas. From raving about young adult books to using her creativity to her advantage, you'll find her planning for her next big conquest. As an aspiring leader in education, Zainab enjoys reading on the latest discoveries, spending time with her loved ones, and catching up on the latest trends with her students. That sounds so wholesome. I absolutely loved that. So I want you to tell us about what got you into teaching in the first place. And you teach high school. I know a lot of people shy away from that. What inspires you?
Um, well, I think for me, honestly, it hit when I myself was in high school and I knew I wanted to be in education. I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to make a change. I wanted something, right? And so I went to a different school for every year of high school, and a lot of them were in different countries. So I really got exposed to all of these different curriculums and campuses and school systems, and it was just mind blowing, honestly. But personally, for me, what I really, really appreciated in the field of education is how impressionable you are at that age, whether that is from your peers or from your teachers, your family, your friends. And personally, growing up, I got severely bullied in high school and, especially during my sophomore and junior years. So I had a lot of really amazing teachers that saw me for me, and I am still in contact with them to this day. We laugh, we joke, and all that. And if it weren't for them, I don't think I'd possibly be here because I want to provide that same comfort I was given to when I was their age.
I think you are the perfect example of giving back to the community. You received, love and care from your teachers, and that is exactly what you're giving right now. You were telling me that your students sometimes drop by for lunch, and I truly, truly believe that you only do that with teachers that you admire, that you find friendship in. But during the pandemic, how have you been able to connect with your students?
Oh gosh, excuse me. It's been really difficult. We first started teaching. I was teaching from my house. I had like a little study room, and I would wake up every morning, get dressed, get my coffee, and I'd sit in front of my laptop, and I'd lead a Zoom class. And college doesn't really teach you how to do that. There's not a BuzzFeed article that you can, read and be like, 10 things that you need to know about virtual teaching. I feel like now I could probably write that article myself, but you couldn't really Google that. Like, how do I do this? What are some things I can take into account? So it was a huge trial and error. And one thing that I knew is that regardless of who my students were before I met them, is that they had been through a lot. And the pandemic was definitely not something that was easy for most. Personally speaking, it wasn't easy for me, but you had to put that curtain on and be that constant for your students. And one thing that I did on Zoom is like I introduced myself. We played games. Like I told them on the first day, I'm like, okay, here's what you're gonna do. I made a list of like random household items, and I'm like, the first person to run and go and get this is gonna get like something in the mail, right? And so
Okay.
I had these pizza vouchers, and so you had students running across their homes looking for the last roll of toilet paper because I was trying to be funny about the whole pandemic, looking for a toothbrush, a vegetable, and even their parents were like, "What is going on?" They're
What
like,
are
"I'm
you
in
doing?
school, like
Right.
I'm in school, like what do you mean?" And but circling back to like how I've built that is because relationships, they trump everything. So as long as you've established something, even when I transitioned into a hybrid format where I was teaching in my classroom on Zoom and in person, we still had that class culture that we'd created. And so when you see your students in person, it's kind of like this weird reunion moment, like, and you're in a mask,
Right.
so you see like half of their face, but I'm like, I've seen you, you've seen me. I think this is you. And it's almost like a little reunion moment. It's very special. And I think just maintaining those relationships and growing them, they really do make an impact and they really help you push through everything.
No, Zainab, it seems like you have this very special bond with your students. You definitely seem like that cool teacher making your students get toilet paper rolls, the last toilet paper rolls. I bet their parents were confused. But what about, you kind of do hit a little bit on how COVID impacted your health, whether, I'm curious whether that be mental health or physical or both. How has COVID impacted your students as well? Were you able to see directly that this pandemic was impacting them, on screen? Were you able to kind of get that, or, tell us about that?
Honestly, it's been life changing. It's been heartbreaking hearing some of their stories. Personally, for me, my mental health really suffered in the pandemic, especially having to teach and guide your students, and you yourself don't have all the answers for them. They'd ask you, like, when are we going back to school, or like, when are we going to be doing this? When are we? And you don't have those answers for them, and they're
Right.
looking to you to provide that. And, as teachers, I think we're incredibly hard on ourselves because we're very nurturing and giving, and we want the best for our students and we want to be the best for them. And, sometimes our circumstances are something we can't control. My students have been through so much. Like, I can't even begin. Like, if I were to sit here and list all the things that they've been through, we'd be here for like 3 hours.
Wow.
A
Wow.
lot of my students had COVID. A lot of them came in on Zoom and told us that they had had COVID over the summer, or when we transitioned into a hybrid model, they had COVID and they were at home for a month. I had a student tell me how painful it was, how it got to a point where you could feel your bones, like your bones physically hurt. I've had students who lost their parent or a family member to COVID. Um, I've had students who had to pick up jobs because of the pandemic to help provide that support. I had a specific student tell me how his mother suffered a heart attack while she was pregnant. Ended up half of her body was paralyzed, and he had to he was the oldest, so he had to really push forward and provide for the family. A lot of my students were working while trying to log into Zoom or come to in-person school while we were in the hybrid model. It's been a lot for them, but I told them at the end of the year that, as horrible as this is, you have made history. No one in the world has ever or will do what you've done this year. And that's something extremely remarkable because they have persevered so much. They've been through so much. And I'm incredibly proud of them that they made it through.
And as a student, I don't know why that kind of hit home, being told that we definitely are a batch that had to go through something that was so unique and so heartbreaking at many times. But I want to know, Zainab, how were you able to provide comfort for your students? Take that bond, nurture it more. I mean, has that bond strengthened because of the pandemic? How are you able to help them?
Yeah, and I'm really sorry that you went through this. I'm pretty sure many of the viewers. I'm really sorry y'all had to go through this. No student deserves this.
Yeah.
Um, so nurturing the bond. So when I first met my students, I told them from the very get-go, like, I had no problem telling my students, like, I don't know. Like, when are we going back to school? I really don't know. I don't know the answers to a lot of things, but I am here. Um, I really would just reinforce that I'm open to listening. Whether if we're in lessons and they have a different opinion, or we're talking about something, or they hesitated on, speaking their mind, I'm open to listening. They know that they can stay after class and speak to me. And I've provided, different resources for them to submit in case they wanted to reach out, whether that's like an anonymous Google form or like a Google form request, like, I just want to talk to you. They could, our school platform that we used was Schoology. So if they wanted to contact me there, they could. I had after school Zoom tutorials where I literally hop on Zoom and we'd I told them they can come in and talk if they needed to, or I could help them with something if necessary. So
Right.
it's just doing what you can with this with the cards that you've been dealt. And I tried my best.
Yeah. And I'm sure that your students are extremely grateful for you. And like as a student, you're not my teacher, but I just feel so grateful that there are teachers out there like you and some of the teachers that I have that have been putting in blood, sweat, and tears into this year, into making sure that we are getting the education that we need in such an odd time. But Zainab, we will be right back after our short break. You're all watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV. We'll be right back with Zainab.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me! No justice! No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world?
You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned have brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Welcome back to NextGen. I'm here with Zainab Jabak, a high school teacher in Houston, Texas. Now, Zainab, you were telling me about what inspired you to go into education when we first began the segment today. Now, to our viewers, to our young viewers, some of them might want to go into education. What are some things that you wish that you heard before, some difficulties that they should look out for in the field of education?
Okay, so if you couldn't tell, I'm visibly Muslim. And I think going into any field, being a young Muslim female who wears hijab, it can be a little discouraging at times when you're the only one or you look different, you stand out. And I've always kind of, growing up, especially when I was in high school, I went through the whole, maybe I'd be treated differently if I didn't look this way, but I do stand out. And I think if you stand out and you take it to your advantage, use that to your advantage, it works wonders. So what are some things that I wish I had known? That you're going to get a lot of questions. I'm sure, as if anyone watching is visibly Muslim, as you already know, you probably do get a lot of questions. I still get a lot of questions from my students, but they know I'm open to answering them. Right. Just know that it's not always going to be easy. There are going to be moments where you're like, is this really for me? Is all this that I'm trying to do really worth it? Am I good enough for this? The field of education is one of the most rewarding fields out there, but it's also one of the most challenging ones, just because your circumstances can change in an instant, whether that be in a pandemic or not. And one thing I wish I had known was how much grace you really need to give yourself going in, because it's so easy to be hard on yourself, especially when you want to be the best for your students, as all of us want to be. All teachers want to be the best for their kids. But just learning to give yourself grace and practicing giving yourself grace whenever, things are difficult, because going into the field, you're going to have a lot of observations. You're going to have to meet a lot of people and deal with different people. And there are going to be a lot of expectations from you, but just practicing giving yourself grace in the hardest of moments really does help.
And I think this pandemic has taught all of us to cut ourselves, a bit of slack, to give ourselves a break, because we all definitely need it. And especially as a teacher, you are not just responsible for yourself, but for a whole classroom full of students. So, you definitely need to give yourself a break more than others. But Zainab, there is a lot of, I feel, negativity, maybe some stereotyping around teachers not being able to cope with difficult situations, not being able to change in these difficult situations. What do you think we can do to address some of those stereotypes, whether it be, in general or particularly in specific communities?
Yeah, I think being a teacher, I personally, I'm part of the Arab community, and a lot of our Muslim Arab communities, we do have that stigma. But even in the US here, we also have that stigma. Sometimes we don't give teachers enough of the respect or credit that they need. A lot of the times we're not looked at as professionals. We're just seen as a teacher. And unfortunately, there's this connotation that's been associated with it. Um, Honestly, I come from a very STEM heavy family. My father's an engineer. My brother's an engineer. He's in college graduating like this semester. My younger brother, who's in high school, his elective is engineering, and my aunts, my uncles, they're all either doctors or they are going into physics or business, just very heavily STEM based and just very very Arab is how I would describe. I'm pretty sure in other communities we have the typical, engineer, lawyer, or doctor, right? But the engineer, lawyers, and doctors that we have today were in a lot of teachers' classrooms a couple of years ago. We help cultivate, the next generation of doctors or engineers or lawyers that are arguing or fighting for a better cause. And it's very difficult going into a community or just speaking to someone who may not be aware of how impactful teachers are. And I think the most important thing that we can do is have conversations. And I know they're really difficult sometimes. I remember I had a family member contact my mother, and she basically discouraged her from me being a teacher and told her what is she going to do with her life? And she's not going to get paid well. What is she going to be in the future? She basically, in a sense, was coming from a concerned point of view, but I didn't really see it that way. But I think the most important part is having those conversations, because a lot of people are ignorant, and it's not necessarily a negative thing to be ignorant, but it is a negative thing if you choose to be ignorant. So we really have to push for those conversations.
I heard the story of some, auntie calling your mom and discouraging her from making you a teacher, from allowing you to choose that profession. And I think that's very unfortunate, but it's also very common in many of our communities, whether it be the Arab, the Desi community. It is very common. So two young people, right? Two young Muslim women, maybe, right? Just two students who might be choosing their profession right now. What is one final piece of advice? Maybe they were in that same position. It seems like your parents were supportive of you. What if they don't have that same support system? What can they do to hopefully pursue their dreams, to give back to their community like you are doing?
Honestly, just despite how discouraging you may be surrounded, with discouraging people or any negativity, just keep pushing forward. My advice, honestly, is even though you may not have that support at home or that support in your friend group or whatever group that you have in your life or multiple groups, try to surround yourself with people that do see things the same way that you do. It could be a professor, it could be a teacher, it could be people who are in your class who are wanting to do the same thing. And then once you get to that point where you've made it, where everything you've ever wanted is right in front of you, I think that's going to speak volumes for all the other people that discouraged.
So you're saying take your path, let your actions speak louder than your words. I know teachers, especially English teachers, don't like cliches, but that was the cliche of today.
That was the most cliché thing I've ever said, but I'm so serious as an English teacher.
Yeah, I know. I can tell that you're cringing so hard right now only a little after hearing that cliche. But I think that you are the embodiment of somebody that faced discouragement, that still faces hardship, especially during this pandemic. But you took all of that and you're able to create a stronger bond with your students. I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the teachers that have been putting so much effort into what they do so wonderfully. Thank you so much, Zainab.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved being on here. Thank you so much.
It is an honor and absolute pleasure to have you. And thank you so much to our audience for tuning in to today's episode of Next Gen. And until next week, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.